My daughter-in-law demanded the $10 million textile company, but her face drained of color when I presented the document. My husband, Frank, was to inherit the house, the $10 million, and the directorship. When Andrea heard that a lawyer had arrived for Jordan's inheritance process, her glee was unmistakable. She entered the living room as though she owned it. Andrea, always inquiring about the inheritance and its finalization, must have been anticipating this moment. Ignoring my presence, she made a beeline for the lawyer. Previously, I might have confronted her, but I remained silent this time, curious to hear her next words. Her comments, more grasping than I expected, prompted me to burst out laughing, clutching my stomach. The lawyer was visibly shocked, and I continued to laugh at Andrea's audacity. Unamused, Andrea shot me an icy glare. "Do you think you'll get your father-in-law's inheritance?" I laughed at her fixation on money and her theatrics. Pointing to Frank, who had just arrived, she raised her voice. "The right to inherit belongs to my husband, Frank." I took a deep breath, ready to reveal the truth. "My name is Emma, and I am 59 years old. I have been a full-time housewife, supporting my husband, Jordan, a doctor, throughout his career. Even after becoming a director, he continued his relentless work ethic. Frank grew up inspired by his father and chose to follow in his footsteps. I believe my husband lived a happy and fulfilling life, but he passed away at 68, likely from overworking. At his well-attended funeral, I was comforted by the turnout, which included not just colleagues but many grateful patients. Although I only saw Jordan's daily routine, the love and respect he received assured me he had led a righteous life. During the summer funeral, Andrea, my eldest son's wife, seemed out of place and oddly relieved about her father-in-law's passing. My suspicions were confirmed when I overheard her speculating about his savings to relatives, inappropriate for the somber occasion. Frank, noticing her behavior, apologized to me with a remorseful expression. "Mom, I'm truly sorry. No matter how often I correct her, Andrea just doesn't listen." "It's not your fault, Frank, but if that's how you feel, could you please speak sternly to her? Many people are attending this event." I was aware of Andrea's behavior long before Frank brought it up. Recalling her unacceptable conduct, I remembered how she offered no assistance or comfort while I was occupied with my husband's funeral preparations. To make matters worse, she constantly talked about the money, asking questions like, "Your husband had a significant inheritance, right? How much was it? Even though you're his wife, it's his inheritance, so don't squander it, okay? Did you come here just to say that? Is that all you have to say? Well, yeah, if you squander it, just because you don't have long to live, I'll be in trouble." Anger and disbelief overwhelmed me as Andrea spoke as though my late husband's assets were her own. She always belittled me and was sarcastic. I don't understand her animosity towards me, but her remarks about other people's assets have often left me disheartened. My son, Frank, inspired by his father, pursued a career in medicine. Although Frank's income is decent, Andrea has always been excessively fixated on money. She would often call me, expressing concerns like, "I'm worried about our financial future with Frank's low income," or "We're short on money," hinting that she expected financial support. As a result, getting along with her was exceptionally challenging. I used to overlook her behavior, but now that she's targeting my husband's inheritance, I've had enough. Frank's income is quite unstable, so we can't afford to spend freely or enjoy luxuries. "Oh, why don't you work then? That would help with the household expenses, and you could afford some luxuries." "What? It's ridiculous for a doctor's wife to have to work. You're fortunate, your husband earned well, and you could live comfortably." No matter how many times I tried to advise her, her attitude only worsened, and our disputes grew more heated. She didn't hesitate to demean her own husband, Frank, just to belittle me. From her point of view, I'm just her mother-in-law, but once married, we're family. I couldn't tolerate her disrespectful treatment of family members. Thanks to my husband, I've lived comfortably. If she desired the same, perhaps she should respect and support her husband more. If there was something about Frank to respect, then maybe. Anyway, I'm off to get my nails done and have a spa day. Don't forget about the inheritance, okay? By now, she blurted out whatever she wanted and promptly left the house. Given her turbulent behavior, I began to wonder how Frank was treated at home. However, her self-centered actions didn't end there. During the inheritance proceedings, she continued her poor behavior, which became increasingly intolerable even after the funeral. Every time she visited, she'd greet me with, "How's the inheritance coming along?" It felt like a standard greeting. Despite explaining several times that the process takes time, she either forgets or doesn't understand and constantly pressures me whenever she sees me. I've told her multiple times that she has no rights to the inheritance, but she doesn't seem to understand that. Whether she thinks Frank's money is hers or she has another agenda, she appears convinced that she will inherit a substantial amount. After discussing with Frank, or rather, steering the conversation to her benefit, she likely aims to secure a portion of the inheritance. If that were the only issue, it would be something for Frank to manage. However, her actions impact everyone involved, complicating and escalating the stress of the situation. I shouldn't interfere, but Andrea attempted to take valuable items from our home. "Andrea, what are you doing?" "That's my necklace." "Oh, come on, don't be so stingy, we're family, so it's okay, right? I can't be friends with someone who steals from me." "Fine, then I'll consider it an advance on the inheritance." "That's okay, right? I'm being patient here." No matter how often I told her not to behave like this, she wouldn't listen. From the moment she took my cherished necklace, a gift from my husband, I couldn't tolerate it anymore. After that, I never opened the door to her again, even though Frank often messaged me, apologizing for Andrea's actions, unable to stop her. I lost hope in expecting anything from Frank or Andrea. I didn't even have time to mourn the loss of the necklace as her harassment persisted. She maligned me to her friends and others, labeling me the worst mother-in-law who wouldn't even let her inside the house. The neighbors expressed concern with sympathetic smiles, but it only added to my distress. I don't understand her deep-seated animosity towards me, it's headache-inducing. Hey, pause for a moment, would you? Support us by liking this video and subscribing for more. Now, let's dive back into the story. What pained me the most was the letter I found in our mailbox. I felt repulsion just seeing the already opened envelope. When I examined its contents, it was addressed to Frank and his wife. Whether it's Andrea's tactic of harassment because I won't let her in, her credit card bill was in our mailbox. Seeing the statement filled with lavish expenses from luxury restaurants and online shopping chilled me. "Frank, there's a credit card bill for Andrea in our mailbox. It was already opened and checked. What's the meaning of this?" I have no idea. It seems like she's spending a lot. She always talks about her income to me. Is everything okay?" "Well, it's tough, Mom. I'm sorry to ask, but could you pay it for us?" Wanting to voice my complaints, I contacted Frank. However, whether under Andrea's influence or due to the power dynamics in his household, his response left me dumbfounded. I wondered why I should help them. Why would he even think I'd assist them? He couldn't even retrieve the cherished necklace from his wife. What are you even saying? I also sharply criticized his behavior, which seemed to only recall what was convenient for him. "I've already done my part in supporting you as a parent. Why would an adult like you burden their parent and ask for help?" "Well, we have Dad's inheritance, right? You won't be able to use it all by yourself. Please, I thought you would help. There's a saying about a thief acting brazenly after committing theft, and now I understand it. Frank, you and Andrea are perfectly suited for each other. I'm severing ties, stay away from me. I could sense from the other end of the phone that he wasn't taking my words seriously. I was furious with his attitude. After hanging up, I immediately tossed the bill into the trash. The notion that Andrea might have deliberately placed it in our mailbox, assuming I would pay, was astounding. Above all, it was an unthinkable act that made me question her character. Do you think I haven't considered it? Is there a way to secure the inheritance? Jordan, what should I do? I asked, picking up my husband's photo unconsciously, my anger and disappointment towards Frank and Andrea clouding my thoughts. I've lost my grasp on how to manage my emotions. Is it okay to proceed with the inheritance as it stands? Amid my uncertainties, I somehow found the courage. I hope someday they face the consequences of their appalling behavior. Frustrated, I handled the inheritance proceedings alone. Perhaps my sentiments came through, as I discovered my husband had left a will, and something specific was noted in it. After reading the will my husband left, I resolved to protect myself and retaliate against them. Phew, I'm relieved. It seems Jordan was on my side after all, I whispered, holding back tears and pressing the will to my chest. I regained my composure and clenched my fist, deciding not to remain passive and let those two dictate the terms. I decided to wait for the right moment to make a significant move against them. Maybe because I felt validated at the thought of being able to retaliate for all the suffering I had endured, I completely forgot about Andrea's bill. I would have discarded it right from the start, not intending to pay, but she must have received a reminder. This time, I received a message from her, even though I had told her the inheritance proceedings were not yet complete. There were false accusations that I wanted to control everything. It's because you haven't settled the inheritance yet. I'll wait a little longer, but please do it as soon as possible. Oh, by the way, did you see the bill I left in the mailbox? Please make that payment. What are you talking about? Stop joking. Why do you think you're entitled to the inheritance? Oh, come on, Frank is the eldest son, right? It's only natural for him to inherit, isn't it? Andrea scoffed and remarked with a smirk. While Frank's role as the eldest son typically implies some right to inherit, this is not always the case. Even after Andrea said all this, I still haven't told them the critical detail. Even if I don't tell them, it's their issue, and they should naturally be aware of it. However, for those who think only of their convenience, it might be hard to realize. I was waiting for the perfect moment when they would crumble, watching for the right timing, and finally, that moment arrived. It was after I had discussed the situation with the lawyer and, with his cooperation, finalized the plan. I will notify Frank once the procedure is complete, following my discussion with the lawyer. To me, it's merely routine communication, but as expected, Andrea arrived at my house, her face beaming with joy. I had deliberately left the front door unlocked. Without any suspicion, she opened it and marched in. Seeing her, I could barely contain my laughter. I've been waiting for so long, isn't it terrible? You've been reluctant to complete the procedure and won't give up the inheritance. Oh, Andrea, what brings you here? Is this gentleman the lawyer? I am Jess, Frank's wife. Ignoring me completely, she went straight to the lawyer sitting in front of me. Normally, I would scold her for such rude behavior, but this time I held back and waited. She turned her back to me, disregarding my presence, and approached the lawyer. Finally, we will inherit this house, $10 million, and the director's position because Frank is the eldest son, she declared. Her greedy statement was more than I anticipated, and I burst out laughing, clutching my stomach. The audacity of her remark and the lawyer's stunned expression made it even more amusing, and I continued to laugh. Of course, Andrea did not find the situation funny and gave me a cold glare. Hey, what's so funny? Are you upset that we are taking the inheritance? No, why $10 million? How did you come up with that amount? Come on, your husband worked as a doctor for a long time, right? He probably didn't have time to spend money. It's obvious that there's that much money, unless you've already used it. I genuinely laughed at her fixation on money. Whatever I choose to do with my inheritance is my business, and you have no right to complain. However, it seems she doesn't like the idea of me inheriting. How many times have I told you, since you don't have much longer to live, don't do anything reckless. Even if you're related by marriage, it's quite something to say that to me, your elder. Didn't I tell you that you have no right to inherit? Andrea, wearing the necklace she stole from me, glared at me sharply. I have no intention of letting her take anything more precious from me. I resolved not to lose to her, who is self-centered, greedy, and obsessed with money. I clenched my fist, pointing to the late-arriving Frank. Andrea exclaimed loudly, "The right to inherit belongs to my husband, Frank." Taking a deep breath, I decided to tell them the truth. You see, there shouldn't be any inheritance for you two to claim. Frank, isn't that right? Huh, why Mom? What do you mean? Oh, don't you have any idea? Aren't you forgetting something? Wait, are you talking about that issue? It was resolved a long time ago, wasn't it? Duh, what are you even talking about? Truly disappointing. What have you made amends for? What's resolved? Don't talk nonsense. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? I was taken aback by her demeanor, as if she had either completely forgotten or was utterly unaware of the issue, even though she was the cause of the situation. It seemed she couldn't remember it at all. I decided to explain the situation in detail so they could understand. Frank had married Andrea a few years ago, but before that, he was already married to another woman and had a child with her. Despite having a family, he neglected them to engage in an affair with Andrea. After their affair, Frank and Andrea married, and the truth emerged when Frank approached Jordan, unable to pay alimony and child support by himself. Frank, what were you thinking? I never thought you would stoop this low. I had no other choice if I wanted to marry Andrea. What are you saying? You're the one who committed the wrongdoing. Even if you are my son, don't expect me to pay for your mistakes. Frank, take responsibility and sort it out yourself. Why can't you help me a bit? As a doctor, you are constantly working and don't have time to spend money, so you must have some to spare, right? Frank's audacious remark pushed my husband's anger to its peak. When Frank started making excuses about being overwhelmed with his new life and needing money for their wedding, my husband decided to cast aside his feelings as a parent and prioritize his grandchild instead. Fine, I'll pay on your behalf. There's no need for my grandchild to suffer because of a terrible father like you. Dad, don't say it in such a sarcastic way. I'm your son, you know. Exactly, that's the point. And in exchange, I won't support you in any way from now on, and of course, don't expect to inherit a single thing from me. Frank probably thought that my husband's words were just declarations made in the heat of the moment, but my husband believed that someone who abandons their family doesn't deserve recognition. He neither attended the wedding nor offered any support. Dad, just let it go. In the future, you'll rely on us for care, right? We are family, so try to compromise a bit. No way. Why would I bother with someone like you? Knowing that his father had money, Frank had previously mentioned the need for future care and requested support. However, my husband didn't heed Frank's words and, as he declared, made sure it was written in his will. It clearly stated that everything should go to his wife and grandchild. My husband, with his strict personality, had meticulously written and prepared the will to ensure that not even a small amount of money would go to Frank and his wife. This fact became known when my husband's lawyer revealed the will during the funeral proceedings. He mentioned he had received the will from my husband in advance. Remembering the anger at that time brings up emotions, but I deeply thanked my husband for his foresight and protection. My husband left a will stating that even though Frank is his son, he does not have the right to inherit his father's estate. When the lawyer read the contents of the will, Frank and Andrea were shocked. I decided to add insult to injury. "Oh, by the way, Andrea, you took items from our house, right? You said it was like an advance on the inheritance, but you heard the will the lawyer read, right? You have no rights, so give it back. It was a gift from my husband to me." I pointed to the necklace she was wearing. She angrily threw the necklace at me, clicking her tongue and glaring, probably restrained by the lawyer's presence from saying anything reckless. "I didn't hear about this. I thought I'd finally get my father-in-law's inheritance. I came all the way here today. What's going on? When you announced your marriage, you said being pursued meant you were more attractive, so it was inevitable, right? You knew what you were getting into when you got involved with him while he already had a family." I remembered how furious I was at her attitude back then. I used to think Frank was deceived by such a terrible woman, but now I realize they are a perfectly matched couple. "I will inherit." "Oh, there's the hospital. It would be troublesome if the director was absent, right? This kind of succession is usually done by the son." "Too bad, it's already been handed over to a competent subordinate." Why isn't it normal for the son to take over?" To begin with, you're doing something that's not normal, right? It's your own doing. Realize that you're not the norm." She was desperate for the inheritance, whether it be the hospital or the house. In the end, she clung to the lawyer asking, "Then what can I get?" But the lawyer my husband had contracted wouldn't easily tell her. He repeatedly explained the contents of the will, stating, "The two of you have no inheritance rights," and responded calmly, "This is unbelievable. I don't believe it. It must be a mistake. Really, no matter how much you fuss, nothing will change. Even if you sue, you'll just end up embarrassed. If you're okay with that, feel free to do so." Perhaps finding my cold treatment unbearable, she stormed out of the house, her face as red as a boil. I watched her leave with Frank. I held the necklace and quietly pumped my fist in triumph. After that, she never contacted me or visited the house again, and the inheritance procedures were completed smoothly. I was worried they would confront Frank's ex-wife, who has a grandchild, but Frank, who doesn't even pay child support, wouldn't know her contact details, so there were no issues. Frank and Andrea, who didn't get any inheritance, seemed to be having a big quarrel. Andrea told Frank, "I married you thinking I would get a big inheritance from your father," and they are apparently on the brink of divorce. The saying, "end of money, end of love," fits them perfectly. I only received one contact from Frank, saying, "Give me the money or house you inherited," but I naturally ignored it. I exclaimed, "Don't talk nonsense while you're awake," and hung up the phone. I sighed, wondering where I went wrong in raising my son, but there was also good news. A letter arrived from Frank's ex-wife, stating that the inheritance procedures were completed. Included in it was an update, a photo of my adorable grandchild, and words of gratitude. "Thank you for being such wonderful grandparents." They are now living very happily. The grandchild, whom my husband had been concerned about until the end, is growing up healthy and living happily with her new father. The letter also contained a lovely family photo. Although I felt guilt as a parent, my mood was brightened, and my heart warmed. I was overjoyed and immediately read the letter in front of my husband's altar to report to him. I was continuously disappointed by Frank's actions and words. However, I could report to my husband about the grandchild, which always brought a smile to his face, and I felt happy and satisfied. Let's conclude the story shortly. Life went on, and while Frank and Andrea's drama continued to unfold, I found peace in my own life. I continued to cherish the memories of my husband and found solace in the well-being of his grandchild. The inheritance, rightfully mine, brought me a sense of security and allowed me to live comfortably, free from their constant demands. Andrea's attempts to disrupt my life had backfired spectacularly, and I emerged victorious. As for Frank, he remained a disappointment, but I had learned to accept his flaws and move on.